Hello and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. It is review time. We're looking back at the weekend's games and I've got a couple of guests on with me this week. We're going to be giving you all the stats, all the data you need to look back at this weekend's games. I'm your host, Stattorino.
I'm Charli Parks.
And I'm Matt Clough.
Yes, hello listener. Welcome to this Game Week 7 review on Decoding the WSL. You heard there, I've got a couple of guests with me today. We have the dynamic duo, I'll call you, from the Why Always She podcast. It is Charli and Matt. How are you doing?
We're great, thank you. Other than one particular result from this weekend, which we're hoping that we won't have to talk about in too much detail, we're doing great.
Actually, to be fair, I have two particular results from this weekend that have kind of put me in the mire, but one's men's football, so we don't need to worry about that here.
Yeah, Charli did give me warning that you might be a bit grumpy, Matt, after obviously you're both Leicester women fans and then you're a Bolton men's fan. What was the score on Saturday?
It was just a casual 5-0 loss to a team that had previously also lost 5-0 at home. So, technically we've lost 10-0 on aggregate to Wycombe Wanderers if you apply that logic. I was kind of thinking about, what I was going to say on this earlier. And I was very conscious of the fact that if I said everything, I was like, how much of this is factual and how much of this is me just being like, well, I hope everyone else has an awful time with football. Everyone else needs to be as miserable as I feel right now. So I've tried to temper that a little bit, not totally.
Just a bit, just enough. I'm not quite in the same boat as you. I've got kind of four teams that I keep an eye on. So Arsenal are very much my sort of top tier team. Obviously the men and women did all right. I think I'd take a draw for the men. The women obviously did very well. And then Peterborough, my hometown team, the women lost 2-1, but the men won a comfortable, I think it was 6-1 in the end against Cambridge, the Cambridgeshire derby.
Yeah.
We are now actually, apart from Wycombe, we are the top scorers in League One, despite the fact we are, I think, 14th.
I did see, I know this is obviously a women's football podcast, but I did see a stat that I think Peterborough are the top scorers in the country over the last sort of 5 or 6 seasons or something like that. So, you picked the right team to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a good game when you go down to watch Peterborough because especially if you're a neutral, actually, because you're going to see goals. I think for years it's been the ground with the most goals sort of each season. We're very attacking football. We've got Fergie Jr. As manager, but although he's not particularly well liked. But it's always good fun going to watch Posh, even if you never ever see a clean sheet. But we'll get on to the more important stuff, I guess, and start talking about the women's football and the WSL. So here's a little roundup of what happened this weekend. The first of the 2 Friday night games saw Arsenal get their first home win of the season with a 5-star performance against Brighton with 5 different scorers. However, it was not a good night for the other team from North London as Bunny Shaw extended her lead as top scorer in the league with a hat-trick and a 4-0 win at home to Spurs. There was a totally wicked result for the visitors to the totally wicked stadium as Chelsea kept up their 100% record with a 3-0 win against Liverpool on Sunday lunchtime. And then, stop the music, an Everton player has scored a goal, although they're still looking for their first win because the match finished 1-0 away at Palace. West Ham ended their 15-game winless streak in the WSL with a 1-0 win against a quite injury-depleted Leicester. And then finally, United fans were left disappointed once again as they drew for the third game running, this time 0-0 at home to Villa. But we will start with the game at the Emirates. Yes, Arsenal 5, Brighton 0. This was Friday, 7 o'clock at the Emirates, or if you're anything like me, listener, watching on YouTube, I don't know if you two might have been doing the same. The game started off with a Beth Mead goal. I think it was about 15 minutes in. She opened the scoring, chopped inside Poppy Pattinson with a left-footed curled shot into the far corner. It was then 2-0 after a good move down the right from Arsenal. Kim Little crossing in to Caitlin Ford from about 2 or 3 metres out to just touch it in. Then we saw very much a fuck it, I'm Frida Marnham sort of energy as she curled in a shot from the corner of the box over a pretty helpless Sophie Bagley into the top bins. Brighton finally got their first shot at 65 minutes in, but nothing to really test Arsenal too much. It was 4-0 not too long later as Lena Hurtig scored a header. It did hit Sophie Bagley and one of the Brighton defenders, but it went down as a hurted goal, which I think will do wonders for her confidence, obviously coming back into the team recently. And then later on, Blackstenius was dragged down in the box and a penalty was given. There was no Kim Little on the pitch at the time, so it went to Alessia Russo, who coolly dispatched to make it 5-0. 5-star performance for Arsenal against a team who are still above them in the table. How did you two read this game? Did you think that was a fair result? Were you expecting it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was necessarily expecting it, because I know you're an Arsenal fan, so, you know, but I think...
Yeah, I'll try and stay impartial.
Even you can admit, like, you know, recently they've been sort of not necessarily turning up in games that you might have expected them to win. But I think, you know, I think we both said, we did watch the game on YouTube, and I think, yeah, we both said we were surprised, I guess a little bit surprised to see Brighton just come out and play exactly as they had in every other game so far, which is this sort of playing out from the back sort of style, which I just felt played into Arsenal's hands again and again and again. They just looked completely outmatched and a bit lost. And I think it took them until about, like, I don't know, it was like the 85th minute to like start going long with their goal kicks and stop playing it out from the back. And I was just like, stop playing it out from the back. But I think, yeah, it was just, I think for me, it was more of like the Arsenal that we were used to seeing last season in, you know, quite a few games, where it was just a complete sort of dominance. They all looked really confident. And yeah, I think there was like 5 different goal scorers. Obviously one was a penalty, but yeah, I think a really positive one. And it felt like one that like the team as a group really needed. And I guess the fans definitely needed as well. But yeah, what did you think, Matt?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think you know, it was interesting to see Brighton's approach in that, as Charlie's just said, you know, they obviously they came out thinking, let's try and go toe to toe with Arsenal here. I think potentially a more pragmatic approach would have been just go for the low block and try and frustrate Arsenal, which, you know, as we've seen over the last sort of 18 months or so, particularly has been really Arsenal's Achilles heel. It's been why Jonas Eidevall's kind of lost his job. But I do think I saw Vidosic getting some criticism after the game. There's a lot of people sort of saying he's they've been unimpressed with Brighton out of possession this season, and it was a naive approach and all that kind of thing. However, I do think just because of Brighton having started the season so strongly, I feel like it's a weird thing to say, but they kind of earned trying to play like that. I can understand the logic in Vidosic kind of looking at the start. Look, you know, that already they're looking very much away from the relegation battle, so it's not like they're trying to kind of eke out every point. So I can fully understand him kind of looking at this game and saying, you know what, it's a free hit, rather than trying to sort of grind out a 0-0. Let's play our game. Let's really measure ourselves against one of the best teams in the WSL and see where we are. And, you know, you can say with hindsight, well, they clearly fell far short there. But ultimately, I feel like it's going to be one of those games where he can say, well, we learned more by doing this and losing 5-0 than we might have done by just going, you know, 5 at the back, desperately punting it long every time we got the ball. And, you know, maybe we would have, you know, eked out a 0-0 or only lost 1-0 or something like that. But yeah, it's one of them. I think it's a learning process for Brighton, and yeah, I think it's still been, obviously, as you said just there, Sam, they're still above Arsenal in the league, so it's still been a fantastic start for the season for them. And yeah, I think kind of still onwards and upwards for them. I didn't see much that's really changed my mind about how well they've performed so far.
Yeah, I think that 5-0 result is sort of bucks the trend of what they've had so far. Obviously, they lost, I think it was 1-0 against City earlier in the season, but other than that, when they played the teams lower in the table, you know, not talking about Arsenal, even lower than Arsenal, they are, yeah, sort of kind of head and shoulders above them. They're putting in some really good performances. And I think Jamie Spanger, friend of the pod, on Arscast this week, said something quite similar to that, Matt, in that she said that it was almost good for Brighton to play that way still, because even though they're getting thrashed away at the Emirates, it helps them in the future because they know a bit more about playing that system.
Yeah.
And they can almost write off the game and say, we're going to lose this. We're against an Arsenal team that are very much clicking in a way that also, like you said, they used to. A lot of those signings that a lot of those players that Arsenal had on the pitch have been at the club for a while. They know each other. They're playing well together, and they're used to it. That being said, going into some of the stats from the game, the possession in the game was quite similar, which I was kind of surprised at because I didn't have, I wasn't looking at the game for 100% of the minutes. I was sort of, to be honest, playing a card game with my family. At the same time and keeping half an eye on it. But yeah, it was 52% possession to Arsenal, 48 to Brighton. But Karaballi was actually the player with the most touches in the game at 104. But Arsenal were the team that did sort of the business at the other end of the pitch, obviously. Brighton only had 1 shot on target from their 6 shots. Arsenal had 8 from their 18, with 3 players getting 2 shots on target. And then Arsenal getting 2.8 XG. And I think scoring 5 goals from that is something that's quite important for them, because last season, something they really struggled with and have been struggling a little bit with this season is underachieving against their XG. They've been getting decent XG numbers and did last year as well, but aren't scoring enough goals given the chances they're getting. So to have this result today, to be that bit more clinical, I think is really good for them going forward. For Arsenal anyway, that is. Arsenal have now won all 13 WSL meetings against Brighton, so they definitely got their number. 49-2 is the aggregate score over those meetings, so 3.8 to about 0.1 on average, which is crazy, isn't it, to be winning that much, that consistently against the same team. And it's not like Brighton are a crap team that are always flirting with relegation every season.
Yeah.
They're doing very well this season and have still just been 5-0'd. But yeah, like you say as well, Arsenal have not had a good start to the season. This is their first win at home, which, if you look at the squad they've already got, look at the players that they've brought in, people like Mariona, I know she was unavailable for this game, but to finally get their first home win when they've already played teams like Everton, I thought was quite surprising. I didn't really clock that until I'd already, until maybe like Wednesday or so when I was looking at last week's preview pod. But yeah, I think 5-0 overall was really good for Arsenal, and Brighton need to just sort of write it off as we've lost that game, we'll win something else.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention as well for Arsenal is that obviously I think it's worth noting that there was 5 different goal scorers. One of them was Russo, but it was a penalty. And it's they're still sort of struggling to get either number 9, on the score sheet. And I thought it was interesting, actually, that the subs felt quite, obviously the game was won by the time the subs were made. And there was sort of, I think, rather than obviously being tactical, it was more of a rotation thing. But I did think it was interesting that she left Russo on and also brought Blackstenius on. I wondered whether that was sort of like trying to get them both a goal or one of them a goal or something. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that as an Arsenal fan, Sam.
Yeah, I think if it's one of those, if Russo had already scored in that game, would Renee have left her on, or would she have taken her off in place of someone else? I think would have been quite interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, Alessia Russo's still underperformed against her XG despite scoring a penalty, as in this season so far, and did last year as well. Stina Blackstenius is the same. She's had 1.5 XG now and hasn't scored a goal. She's actually had the third most XG in the league without scoring, which, yeah, I think goes some way to show that our number 9s aren't really doing what number 9s need to do. I don't know if any new manager coming in is going to fix that. I don't know if we're going to get a new manager in anytime soon. Although if Renee is going to keep substituting players like Emily Fox and Frida Marnham before they get the clean sheet points for me and my fantasy team, I am going to be wanting a manager in pretty soon. Because I think, probably the best week of Fantasy WSL I will ever have. And it just could have been so much better if I had an extra couple of clean sheets. I think I'd have got an extra 10 points from them too. But never mind. We move on. And we'll move on to the next match as well. Yes, the next match was Man City hosting Tottenham Hotspur. This one was 7:30 on Friday night at the Etihad, live on Sky Sports. I also tuned into this one on my phone while playing a card game to see the end of it. Bunny Shaw stole the ball off Claire Hunt and managed to basically just run through and score pretty comfortably after about 24 seconds. It gave me vibes of a training session and Bunny Shaw playing against Cones. To be honest, it was 2-0 in the first half as well. Lauren Hemp twisting and turning on Morris, and then Bunny Shaw having a relatively unchallenged header. I think Claire Hunt was there trying to put her off, but such is the sort of might of Bunny Shaw, it didn't look like there was anyone else there. Bethany England almost got one back with a volley at the far post, but put it over the bar. Lauren Hemp was played in by Jill Rord for a shot that hit the near post, the bar, and the far post and still didn't go in, which I think is very impressive, and I don't know how often that happens. I wish there was stats for that. It was then 3-0 when Hemp got away from Jess Naz to then play Rord in. Bit of reverse there. She showed Hemp how it's done and scored at the near post. And then near the end of the game, or not near the end of the game, a little bit later on, it was 4-0 as Lauren Hemp beat Morris down the line, put it across for a hat-trick of assists for her and a hat-trick of goals for Bunny Shaw as she touched it in at the far post. I know Man City were much the better team here, but before we get into how good City were, I do just want to give a shout-out to Evelina Simonen and Ash Neville, because I thought those two both played really well. I know I only watched half an hour of the actual game, but I did catch up with the highlights on Women's Football Show and YouTube as well, actually. But I thought those two both played really well. And I think if Ash Neville had actually been against Lauren Hemp, she might not have got quite as good a day as she had, because all of Man City's good play went down that left side. I think partly because Lauren Hemp was so good, but also because Ash Neville was so good in putting off, well, anything that Man City tried to do down the right, because Ash Neville was at left back. Matt, how did you see the game? Did you think that Man City was sort of good value for 4? Do you think they could have got more?
I mean, I certainly think they could have got 4. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I don't know if we saw very briefly the BBC did like a highlights roundup to show yesterday between the WSL matches, and they had Jonathan Pearce, who I'm sure a lot of listeners will know from Match of the Day, doing commentary on the City Spurs game. And to be fair, I don't know, as Sky had the game, I don't know if it had been recorded in retrospect, but it is. I would recommend seeking it out if you can find the BBC's version of the highlights, because it is honestly the best comedic timing you'll ever see on the first goal, because he starts by kind of literally quoting Robert Villahelm saying, defence has to be perfect here. There are no mistakes allowed, literally, as Claire Hunt kind of just gets swallowed alive by Bunny Shaw, and it's and the ball's in the back of the net. I mean, I don't want to. Again, this is where I'm slightly wary that I'm going to come across as a very bitter Leicester fan who's just trying to tear all teams down with us. But Spurs. I don't really understand what is going on there. I mean, I think we said on our podcast a couple of times that it felt last season like a lot of their progress was kind of predicated on having a world-class ball carrier in the midfield in Grace Clinton. And obviously, she is no longer there. They, with the best will in the world, haven't been able to replace her. It kind of just feels like they're still playing as if she is there. They've got this... It just feels like in a season when they should be building towards something and developing and evolving, they've kind of gone backwards, because obviously Clinton going, that's kind of out of their hands. I accept that. But it feels like they're still trying to play the same system as if she's there and kind of just not getting the results that, naturally you'd expect, because they don't have Clinton there. They've got this weird situation where they seem to be playing Naz as she seems to be the first choice central striker right now, even though she doesn't really score many goals and is, in my opinion, more of a winger. I think she fits that profile much better. Meanwhile, they've got Beth England and Martha Thomas, both of whom are kind of natural centre forwards, obviously both struggling massively for form, and I'd suggest potentially because neither of them are really playing in a system that suits them. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Sam. I think the fact that Sumanen as a kind of battling midfielder and Ashley Neville as a defender were Spurs' best players on the field, and yet they still lost 4-0 is pretty worrying. The caveat obviously here is it is City. When you've got Lauren Hemp in that kind of mood, when you've got Bunny Shaw in that kind of mood, there is very few teams in the world that can stop them, as Barcelona will attest to. But even so, it's hard to say, and I'm not pinning it on Wilhelm entirely, because obviously if you can see the goal after 20 seconds, it doesn't matter what you've done in training in the week before. It doesn't matter how you were going to set up, because I'm sure he would have said to them, let's keep it tight, let's frustrate City. And if that's only lasted for 20 seconds, then you've got 89 minutes of your plan being just completely out the window. So yeah, it's one of those games you can kind of say, okay, it's just a fluke, horror mistake at the very start, and they're just never going to be able to recover from that. But I think it is kind of symptomatic of a sort of a trend we've seen from Spurs so far this season, and they are sort of flying under the radar a bit in terms of they're not right at the bottom of the table in that big clump of teams, but I do think if I was a Spurs fan, I'd not be hugely thrilled about the way the season has started, really.
I think I agree with everything Matt said, and I think we didn't actually manage to catch the game. We've obviously watched the highlights, but it wasn't on Sky Showcase, and we're cheapskates and we don't have a full Sky Sports subscription, so unless the game's on Showcase, we can't watch it. But I was sort of keeping up with what was going on via like Reddit, and I think it was a Spurs fan potentially, or maybe a City fan, who said, I don't know why Spurs are trying to persist with this style that they always play of like, I guess similar-ish to Brighton, like playing it out from the back a little bit. And I felt like that was an interesting sort of parallel, because obviously we made the argument for Vidosic and Brighton that, yeah, okay, it's your new manager, your new style, it's working so far. You'll learn more by playing against Arsenal as you have been doing this season already. But I felt like to have that attitude for Spurs is silly, because it's not a new manager, it's not a new system.
Not really.
You got beaten 7-0 last season in the same fixture. You know what's going to happen, so why set yourself up for that to happen again? And like I just think they're a defensive mess at the moment. I think I was looking at something earlier, and they've already conceded like half as many goals that they conceded for the whole season last season. They're obviously just like their defenders seem to just be making mistakes all over the shop. Goalkeepers having a mare. Like it's just a weird one. And like Matt said, I feel like, they are in a bit more of a precarious position than I think. Obviously you're looking at the bottom of the table and your Leicesters, West Hams, Evertons, but Spurs are only 2 points above like Leicester, Palace, and West Ham. So it takes a couple of results at the bottom of the table and Spurs to not win a couple of games, and they could be looking a bit dodgy.
Yeah, I mean, out of Leicester, West Ham, and Palace, they're the three teams 2 points behind Spurs, and they're all playing different teams. In next week. So theoretically, if they all won, Spurs could go as low as 10th next week. And I've just double checked what you said about the number of goals they conceded, and you're right. They've conceded 18 in the WSL this season, which I already knew, which is the most out of any team in the WSL, despite the fact that Palace have been on the end of a 7-0 loss already. But Spurs last season conceded just 36, which was pretty good. It's middle of the road. So yeah, already halfway there after a third of the games. Not looking great for Robert Wilhelm. But like you say, Man City are a team that know what they're doing against Spurs. They thrashed them last season. City have actually won the last 6 WSL games against Spurs, and they've won their last 11 of the last 12 at home. So it's not an easy place to go, Man City, for any team, never mind just Spurs. On that BBC commentary as well, also I heard a stat that I didn't know, which was that Bunny Shaw has become the first player to get a hat-trick of hat-tricks against the same team. So the first player in WSL history to score 3 hat-tricks against the same team, which again further shows how much City have Spurs' number, because obviously Bunny Shaw's not played for anyone else in the WSL. Spurs are now 6 WSL matches away from home without a win, which doesn't bode well for sort of Robert Wilhelm's tactics, I guess, in a way. That the end of last season was a bit of a struggle, and then they've obviously lost 2 of their best players, and this season are not really replacing them. I don't think they certainly haven't replaced Clinton properly. I think there are players that are stepping up, like Sumanen. I think I mentioned when I did the pod with, I think it was Jamie and Finn that I did the Spurs pod with before the season, that I thought Sumanen was going to become a really important player for Spurs because she is that progressive player that Grace Clinton was, but in a slightly different way. Sumanen's much more a passing player, whereas Clinton was much more of a carrying player, but she's not really quite as good. They're still trying to do it with carrying, basically, and she's not really quite as good as that. And then I think Bizet, they've been a bit unfortunate because they've replaced it with Rasso, but Rasso's then picked up an injury. And the next replacement is, I guess, Jess Naz. But like you say, they're playing her through the middle. And then Bethany England spent a lot of time out on the wing. Martha Thomas has spent time out on the wing. So, yeah, I don't know if they're necessarily getting the best out of their players, but I do think it's a little bit of... It's kind of just where Spurs are. I don't think they're underperforming the last few games. They've only got 3 points from the last 5 games. But I think generally being a sort of mid-table side, they're 7th at the moment, 2 points away from the top half. I think that's about right. They've actually scored the 3rd most goals in the WSL this season. Only Chelsea, amazingly, and Man City have scored more. So they're doing pretty well in front of goal, generally, 12 goals in 7 games. But yeah, their defensive woes, and when they're coming up against Man City, is never going to be a fun time. In this game, Man City had the bulk of the ball. They had 71% possession to Spurs' 29, obviously. Had almost twice as many touches. 3 Man City players had over 100, which is a lot. The 7 players that completed the most passes were all Man City players. Man City did twice as many key passes. They had about 5 times as much XG, twice as many shots, and 7 shots on target to just 1 for Spurs. So even if Spurs got their shot on target in, they'd have still lost 4-1. It would still been an absolute thrashing. So I think all in all, it's just a comfortable day at the office for Man City. And yeah, I guess one for Spurs to forget.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I will say as well, I said this to you when we watched the highlights. This is like not really related to stats or anything, but I feel like obviously Jill Roord has come back flying out of the gates after doing her ACL, but I feel like every shot she hits and every goal she scores, why is it hit with like the power of 1,000 suns? Like it's like everything is just like smashed into the net.
She doesn't.
I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
she does it really well with minimal backlift as well. It's not like she's like winding up a shot for ages. She's just sort of out of nowhere. It's just a really hard shot, and a lot of the time she shoots them inside the box. So it's not like the keeper's got a lot of reaction time. Yeah, she's pretty clinical.
Yeah. It's nice to see.
But yeah,
despite the ACL injuries, clearly, like Charli said, she's out for less than 10 months or something absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, she's come back, and it genuinely looks like she hasn't missed a step. She's still got this ferocious power. And yeah, I'm thrilled because obviously Man City are really bare bones, don't have a very deep squad at all. So it's great for them that they've got all their players coming back from injury like this.
I think they'll have aspirations to go far in the Champions League and things as well, which they're obviously doing very well in so far, better than I thought they would do.
Yeah, same.
I think better than most people thought they would do, to be honest, especially when they've already played Barcelona. But they're going to need that squad to stay fit. I think that a lot of people, myself included, thought that Bunny Shaw getting injured was the difference last season between Chelsea winning the league and City winning the league, because obviously once she was out, they then fell off a little bit. But yeah, we'll see how they go throughout the rest of this season. But yeah, a comfortable win for Man City. That is Friday night's games wrapped up. We'll just take a quick break now and we'll speak about Sunday's games. Yes, welcome back to Decoding the WSL. We are looking back at game week 7, the matches that happened this weekend. And the next one is Liverpool 0, Chelsea 3. This was Sunday afternoon, 12:30 at St Helens Stadium, which I still find funny that it's called the Totally Wicked Stadium. Sounds like something your, I don't know, gran probably would call it. This one was live on BBC Two as well. Taylor Hines almost opened the scoring again for the second week running, but it was a great block from Chelsea to put it out for a corner. Chelsea did take the lead after Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd hit the bar, which then fell to Guro Reiten, whose shot was blocked by Gemma Bonner, and the ball just fell to Ramirez, who was 5 metres away from goal with nothing in front of her and had a pretty easy finish. It was then 2-0 after a pretty poor pass from Rachel Laws was intercepted by Guro Reiten, who scored from distance before Laws could get back to her line. Liverpool looked better in the second half. They had a good chance after opening up Chelsea's defence, but unfortunately the play running through was centre-back Jasmine Matthews, and she ended up having to shoot from 25 yards out and also fell over as she hit it. So you can guess how that went in the end. But Chelsea wrapped up the goals 3-0 in the second half, with Mara Ramirez having a great run down the right, attacking that baseline. I don't think people realise how good she is at sort of progressing the ball with her carries, because that's not really the sort of game you'd expect from someone with her physical profile. But she did it really well, pulled it back to Captain, who I think had a shot, but it wasn't very good and basically just fell to Aggie Beaver-Jones. She stopped it going wide with a good touch and had, by her standards, a very easy finish to make it 3-0 and get all 3 points for Chelsea. That means Liverpool are probably probably expected in this game. They're still yet to keep a clean sheet in the WSL this season. Chelsea are a team that is just on an absolute steam train at the moment. Bon Pastor seemingly can't do anything wrong there. It's a little bit of a Man City situation as well, where it doesn't matter who they put out, it doesn't matter what team it is, it doesn't matter which player is in which position, it doesn't matter they've got their winger at left back. They're still just going to steamroll teams and score an insane number of goals in the process. Because Liverpool they're no walkovers. It's not like when Chelsea played Palace, and Palace are new to the league and they're still trying to gel as a squad and they've got loads of new players. It was actually just a really solid Liverpool side that has drawn a lot of games, been hard to beat. Matt Beard sets them up really well, and Chelsea just get there and they're like, nah, we're just going to score some goals. What about you two? How did you two see the game?
Yeah, I mean, I had, obviously with the last time these two teams met in Liverpool, I guess, Liverpool adjacent. Yes, I had high hopes for this game being another thriller. As you say, Matt Beard always sets the team up well. And I thought, when was the first goal?
37 minutes.
Yeah, so the first 20, 25 minutes, I was like, oh, this is going to be another sort of tight affair. And then there's it's maybe going to open up and go a bit sort of end to end. Obviously, I think, Smith and Kiernan were sort of getting a lot of joy. I think Smith mainly because she was on Lucy Bronze's sort of side, and I think Lucy Bronze had a tricky first half, I think, and I thought they could have made a lot more of that, and then obviously got quite a few set pieces, but I think I can't remember who the commentary team was, but they were like, oh, Liverpool are really threatening from set pieces. Herbinger's like a set piece specialist, and all this.
See what happened last year as well.
And but I think the problem was they had Herbinger on the set pieces, but they didn't have the ideal player with which to send the set pieces into, which was Sophie Roman Haug. So I think that just sort of came to nothing. And then obviously I think, like you say, Chelsea are just like a steam train, and if you don't turn up, they will punish you. And, they don't need any excuse to punish you. And if you're just going to make silly mistakes at the back, then that's it, you're done. And yeah, I just think that it was a shame for Liverpool because they did create some opportunities, but it was just they didn't necessarily have the players on the pitch to sort of make the most of that at the right time, sort of thing. And obviously it's Chelsea, and we know Chelsea can defend. They're not just it's all attack and nothing else. They can defend, obviously. Buchanan and Bright are having a great season as that partnership. But yeah, I just think had there not been some errors from Liverpool in that first half, I think it could have been a bit closer, and we could have maybe seen a bit more in the second half if, I don't know, heads hadn't dropped a bit maybe. What do you reckon, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I won't step on your toes, Sam, but I'm just looking at some of the stats here, and obviously, along with the 3-0 scoreline, it does look like an absolute domination performance from Chelsea. But yeah, it's a weird game. I feel like we're going to get to the end of this season with Chelsea having won the quadruple and gone undefeated for the entire year, and we're still going to be saying like, yeah, but have they really hit their stride yet? Because I don't know. It doesn't feel like they're really ripping teams apart, and yet they are, racking up these score lines. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, this was the game they lost 4-3 last year, and it was a sort of, it came in a very different context when they'd had that kind of horrible week where they got, I think by the point where they lost to Liverpool, they'd been knocked out of the Champions League, they'd been knocked out of the FA Cup, they'd lost the Conti Cup final, and it just kind of felt like the whole season was spiraling out of nowhere. But yeah, this season they've just kind of rolled in very, very calm, and whereas last season it looked completely chaotic, and you had players literally crying on the pitch, and Emma Hayes saying, "Yeah, it's over, the league's gone." To cut to Sunday, and it just looked so serene, so relaxed. And yeah, I still feel like, just in terms of the title race, I still feel like City maybe have one or two of those performances where they might just have a bit of an off day, like you said, Sam, earlier. If there's a game where Bunny Shaw's out, or even at this point, with how good Raud's been or Hemp's been, if one of those were to go missing, as in miss a couple of games, then you could see them struggling. Chelsea, they just look invincible at the moment. Like you say, they've got Sandy Baltimore, who before the season started, everyone I think would have assumed was going to play as a wide forward, is playing fullback and looking like peak Lucy Bronze. They also have Lucy Bronze. So it's very hard. I haven't really got a measure of them other than, despite kind of how they may look on the eye test, they just look, you can't argue with the results and the stats as well.
Yeah, the stats definitely go in Chelsea's favour on this. The possession was 2/3 to Chelsea, 1/3 to Liverpool. The 9 players with the most touches in the game were all Chelsea players. Chelsea completed over double the number of passes that Liverpool did. And again, the 8 players with the most passes completed were all Chelsea players. Chelsea had about twice as many shots, 17-8, and just over twice as many on target, 10-4. But two little things in the stats that I thought I wanted to sort of pull out a bit was that Chelsea so far have been the best team at sort of overachieving their XG. They're actually getting about double the amount of goals their XG suggests. So that's kind of why it doesn't feel like, I think, that they're thrashing teams when you just watch the game, because they're not getting enough chances to go and win 5-0 and 7-0 and stuff. But in this game, they got enough chances to score 3. They got 2.6 XG, which in the previous games this season, they'd have scored 5 goals from. Because someone like Ritten Canarid would have scored a silly goal from distance or something like that. But in this game, it was 2.6 XG for 3 goals, which is about right. So they're a little bit reverting to the mean, and I think that that'll be interesting to see as we go forward, because obviously they've got Man United in the sort of double game week, I guess you can call it. After Man City. So they've got 2 really tough games against 2 really good defences. And it'll be interesting to see that, they're going to have their defence sort of penetrated a bit as well, and see if they can still get ahead of their XG and still, if they create just as many chances as Man City, are Chelsea still going to be the team that wins the game? The other thing I wanted to pick out was Taylor Hines, because I think this shows a bit about what Liverpool are trying to do. So obviously in the last game, Taylor Hines scored 2 goals from just 2 shots in the game. In this game, Taylor Hines made the fewest passes of any Liverpool player that started the match, with just 9, which is really not a lot, considering the fact that she played, I don't know if she played the whole game, actually. She may well have done. But she also had more shots than any other Liverpool player, with 3. So the fact that your left wing back is not only not really getting involved in the build-up play, but also having the most shots on the team, I think shows a little bit about what Matt Beard is trying to do tactically. sort of thing that I didn't really pick up from watching, to be honest, watching the highlights because I was busy while this was on, or the extended highlights anyway. But I didn't really pick it up from that. But it's one of those things that you don't pick up from the eye test, but I did pick up from the numbers. I don't know if that was anything that you two had looked at.
No, to be honest, I think the only thing I noticed really about Taylor Hines is that I think she did a really good job on writing Cannerid, who had much to the disappointment of my fantasy team, had a very quiet game by her standards. But yeah, that is, I think, I mean, it's great when you have like somebody who plays as your sort of left back / left wing back to be such a goal threat. I mean, can't relate as a Leicester fan. So if you've got that sort of tool in your toolbox, as it were, use it. And she seems to be like, I don't know, maybe since she's obviously switched her allegiance to Jamaica, hasn't she? And she's made her debut for them, and I don't know, maybe just seems to have a bit of like confidence.
Yeah, a lot of confidence, absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Do it, go for it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think she's in a really good... She seems like she's in a really good moment, just like in her life generally, and is just enjoying herself. She's obviously takes the captain's armband 99% of the time because Nife doesn't play that much. So yeah, I just think she's enjoying herself, and that's showing on the pitch. She's in a real purple patch, and yeah, I hope it continues as long as they're not playing Arsenal. Anyway, we'll move on to the next game now. Yes, the next game this weekend was Palace and Everton. That was Sunday at 2:00 at the VBS Community Stadium, it's officially known as, aka the Sutton Stadium. This one was live on YouTube, and I think was going to be, well, one of two games that were going to be one of the more interesting games this weekend, just mostly dependent on what it did to the table. Palace got in the lead very early on with some very high pressing, resulted in India Paige Riley scoring in the opening minute. I think it actually might have been the opening 30 seconds. Set up by Mikato, who really struggled last week. I think she completed 4 passes in the full 90-minute game last week, but generally had a brilliant game yesterday. Honoka Hayashi had a deflected shot from distance that hit the bar not long after. And there were a lot more chances in the first half for Palace, but Courtney Brosnan made some really good saves throughout. I thought she was... other than the one other keeper, I think she was potentially the best keeper in the league this weekend. Then the moment finally came. Vitriki Sari's cross was met by an excellent glancing header from Honoka Hayashi, who is the first Everton player to score a goal this season, 7 matches in, against the team that's just come up from the league below. But they need to take all the positives they can from that. Melissa Lawley almost got another not long after, but there was a great save from Yanez. And then Courtney Brosnan made some good saves in the last 10 minutes to keep Palace out and to get a valuable point for Everton, because they are... I mean, Palace are not necessarily overachieving because they are 10th, but Everton definitely underachieving this season. They've had 3 draws and 4 losses, scoring, 2 goals, 1 own goal, and then Honoka Hayashi's goal yesterday. It is a big point, I think, for Everton, because if they hadn't got that, they would be outright bottom of the table, not just bottom of the table on goal difference as they are now. Where do you see these 2 seasons going? Because I think Palace is a team that I think being in 10th is about where I'd expect them to be, but I seem to remember a certain someone predicting that Everton were going to do quite well this season.
Yeah, I'll take over.
I won't be speaking.
I'll take over here. Charlie's blushes. I mean, yeah, firstly on Palace, obviously we're Leicester fans, so we got to witness in person their 1 win of the season so far. But generally, I think they've been really, really impressive. I think, a lot of people... It was tricky with Bristol City last year because I think it was pretty clear quite early on that they were going to really struggle. And certainly in the second half of the season, their MO basically resorted to just kind of, as we talked about, potential option for Brighton in that Arsenal game, just sit back and try and stop them and then hope anything happens with a long ball forward. And, ultimately it just meant that Bristol City, they were always really up against it. Whereas Palace, I feel like obviously they have had some heavy defeats, but they, in general, I've been so impressed with them. I think they've just got that, they just really need to be commended for how they've taken the season on. I think that like you say, that really high pressing approach, they could have looked at this game and thought, you know what, a draw is not a bad result here. Instead, they literally fly out of the blocks. Everton kicked off the first half and still managed to concede within 30 seconds, which tells you all you need to know about how aggressive that press was. You know, we were talking about Spurs and City doing it earlier, but you know, City have literally got Bunny Shaw, who is probably the best striker in the world right now. Whereas Palace, you know, with the best one in the world, they are working with more limited resources. But yeah, I think, you know, they've had some. I think Riley's been great. I think we obviously, again, Josie Green, who left Leicester and then has turned, as far as we can tell, into sort of prime Franz Beckenbauer over the last few weeks. She looks immense. Yanez, who obviously, again, she was part of that Bristol City side that I mentioned earlier. She had a really, really tough season last year, but actually, I think the numbers support she actually had a good season. It's just that, you know, she that when she was, even though she was kind of outperforming her numbers, she was still conceding a lot of goals just because that's what Bristol City were doing basically. And yeah, I think it's they're probably going to be more disappointed. I think for Everton, it's, as you say, Sam, it's a huge point because if they'd lost yesterday, I mean, put it this way, it would have made me feel a lot better about Leicester because, yeah, they still look like they are really struggling. You know, I think, again, to lean on our Leicester experience, we were at the King Power for our only win of the season so far, which was against Everton. And it very, you know, again, we'll get onto our injury woes, I'm sure, but you know, we basically attacked that game. We pressed early. But you could tell that our basic game plan was try and get ahead, and once you get ahead, just back yourselves to keep them out, and that's exactly what we did. I think we scored within 10 minutes, and then basically, you know, we were just counter-attacking for the rest of the game while backing our defence to hold them out, which they did. I think they still have some real issues going forward, and I think there is, you know, they're also a team that I know they got a lot of criticism for the Chelsea match last week, where again it just felt like quite a naive approach to the game. And you know, it might sound like I'm a bit of a hypocrite, kind of praising Vidosic for doing that against Arsenal, but then criticising Sorensen for doing it against Chelsea. But you know, I think the context matters an awful lot there. I think, you know, Vidosic and Brighton have kind of earned the right to try some stuff out and experiment and maybe take a couple of hits without worrying too much because they're way up the table. Whereas, you know, Everton already need to be looking at every game like we need to squeeze something out of this. And I think trying to play out from the back when you don't, you know, they didn't have Claire Wheeler last week, who is my favourite player in the WSL, but she wasn't playing. She's so pivotal to being able to like spray the ball out quickly, shield the defence. So to not have her against Chelsea and still to try and play out from the back, it didn't sound like a good idea, and so it proved. So yeah, I still think they're in a lot of trouble. But yeah, I think if they'd lost, it would have been full on panic stations. I don't know what they would have done basically, but I just finally from me before we hear from Charlie, but I know Palace, that was the first of three really huge games for them because they played Everton, they've got Villa away next, and then they've got West Ham away, who are obviously both still in that little chunk of teams down the bottom there. So I think after those two extra fixtures, we will know an awful lot more about how the relegation battle is shaping up, basically.
Yeah, agree with everything you said. And I think what Sam was referring to earlier is that I said on our podcast that I thought Everton were going to do quite well this season and sort of overachieve, I guess. The reason I thought that is because they finished 8th last season, and obviously they had this sort of reputation for being very solid defensively, very hard to break down. I mean, Arsenal certainly found that out, even this season, the start of this season. And I thought they could sort of build on that. And then in the way that we've tried to do at Leicester, which we'll get onto in a minute, is just sort of build on having a really solid defensive foundation and then use, like, you know, the odd creative player that you do have to sort of, you know, unlock those opportunities going forward. But I think just as we have, I think there's a lot of parallels between us and Everton in a lot of ways, other than I don't know actually whether I can sort of take any positives about us versus Everton, but I think they've just had, obviously, Aurora Galley was a massive blow for them, for her to get injured, one of their most creative players, and then obviously bought in Gabaro as well. I think Sorensen said they sold Hannah Bennison so they could bring her in. So it's like, and then obviously both of those players get taken out of the game, taken out of the squad early on in the season. They are literally out for the season because they've done their ACLs, and then it's not looking particularly rosy. And I think, as I was trying to struggle to grope for anything that I could say, like, the parallel between us and Everton is we are pretty similar. But I suppose the only thing we've got going for us at the moment is we've beaten Everton. And yeah, that's the only thing I've got to say, really. I think it does look pretty bleak for them. I think the only way I can see them sort of, I guess, staying up and clinging on is if they can defend in the way that we know that they can.
Yeah, based on last season.
Yeah, based on last season and based on some of the performances this season. But yeah, it does seem pretty bleak, to be honest.
I'm just looking at their upcoming fixtures as well, and you can look at this one of two ways, really.
Sorry.
They've got Liverpool at home, Spurs away, and then Man City at home, and those are their 3 league fixtures before the winter break. So, on the one hand, you can kind of say you're probably making them favourites to lose all 3 of those games. I guess on the only upside there is, you can say, if they're planning to make some reinforcements in January, maybe bring in a new striker or a new kind of, creative presence to replace Galley, then you're kind of getting 3 games that you'd struggle to win regardless of what you do in the transfer window out of the way, and then you can bring in the reinforcements. But yeah, I think Everton, I think the teams around them will be looking at them thinking there's a good chance they might not pick up another point until Christmas, which would not be in a good spot for them at that point.
Yeah, I think that little run of games after Christmas is going to be really important for them. They've got Villa, West Ham and Leicester, their first 3 games after. And I think if the sort of Everton takeover that's in the works at the moment goes through, and, the men's side with any of these clubs at the moment in the WSL earn a lot more money for the club than the women's side does. And, giving some money to the women's side shouldn't be a big problem. If they can give some money to the women's side to get some players in, assuming the takeover does go through, they'll want to do it for a bit of good PR and stuff like that, rather than any actual sort of commercial success, I think, starting off anyway. If they do that, Everton women, I think, can get some good players in and really hit the ground running after Christmas. I think Brian Sorensen can be, at times, a very, very good manager, and I think he grinds out a lot of really good results, which is weird to say for a team that likes to press, but I think they've got it in them that if we look back on this in mid-February, that'll be the time when we can actually look and say, okay, this is where I think Everton's season's going to go now. I think we can have a pretty good shout then if they're going to be, 9th, 10th, or if they're actually going to be fighting relegation. Because at the moment, they're down there with Aston Villa, who I think have quite underperformed so far this season. Aston Villa are only ahead of them on goal difference, but they'll, I think, rocket up the table. I think they'll overtake the likes of Palace, your West Hams. Sorry to say it, guys, but your Leicesters as well. I think Villa will rise above those. So Everton have then got to try and catch up. And when you're at the bottom of the table, getting 1 or 2 points, 1 or 3 points, I guess, here and there is not easy to do, and it doesn't come easily, especially when you've scored, when one of your players has scored 1 goal in 7 matches. But they're off the mark, they're getting going, and yeah, I don't think they're going to get many points in the next few games, but we'll wait and see. Everton had slightly more possession in this game. Palace had slightly more shots. It was a pretty close game, other than the fact that Palace did really well in their XG, and I think a word needs to be said for Courtney Brosnan about how well she did, because Palace got 1.8 XG in this game. So the fact they only scored 1 goal from that probably isn't great for them. I think I know Kate Stengel is one of the players that's had a lot of XG in the WSL this season. So if she can hit the ground running a bit more as well and getting some more goal scoring form, I think they'll be just fine. Palace will. Anyway, we'll move on to the other big game near the bottom of the table. So the other game I know is one that you two are not going to want to talk about too much because it was Leicester losing away at West Ham. This one was Sunday, 3:00 at the Chigwell Stadium, live on YouTube as well. Before I get into what happened in the game, I'd just like to say, I don't know why the kits in this game were maroon against black. I don't know why Leicester didn't just play in their home kit of blue, because I don't think that would have clashed enough that it wouldn't have been a problem for the eyes. But anyway, moving on, I thought maroon and black was a bit rubbish, especially when it was, it's November in England, it's getting dark at 3 p.m. But never mind. Hannah Kane almost opened the scoring with an early goal, but just about passed by the post. Katrina Gorry had quite a powerful shot from distance that Leipzig did manage to save. After dispossessing Katrina Gorry, Ruby Mace had a shot from quite a long way out. Must have been a good 40 yards. Seeing Shemek off her line. But the moment that made the difference within the game was West Ham's obviously winner just before half-time. Vivasey was played in, took it round United Leipzig, I thought very well, and was quite clinical with her finish. West Ham ending a run of 15 WSL games without a win, and Leicester now winless in 9 away games in the WSL. You two, I presume, watched this game from start to finish. Give us a little roundup of, just a little one, I won't make you talk about it too much, a little roundup of how you thought the game went, whether it was, was it a fair result? And, do you think this will make much of a mark on either team next weekend?
I think it was a fair result.
That's a nervous laugh there.
Yeah, I think it was a fair result. I don't think we really deserved to get much out of that game. I think, if I'm going to make excuses, obviously, as we've alluded to several times, we are Leicester fans, so we know inside and out what's going on, and we are having a full-on injury crisis. We're playing players out of position. There's players in that starting 11 that would never normally be anywhere near the starting 11. We're having to put Hannah Kane in sort of the number 9 position, who's just coming back from her ACL and isn't a number 9. So it's not an ideal situation. And honestly, when I saw Hannah Kane run through on goal, and I thought that ball was going into the goal, and I would have gone through the ceiling in the lounge because but it's one of them. And I think if that had gone in, we could have probably dug in and ground out a 1-0 win. But I think Amandine said it. The manager, Amandine McHale, said it after the game yesterday. It's just a hard time to concede a goal, literally just before you're about to go in and regroup. So, and they deserved it. Obviously, I think what they do have is two very sort of capable and skilled forward players in Ueki and Asai, which we just don't really have at the moment.
We'd kill for one of those right now.
Yeah, Asai is obviously a great player. Ueki was an absolute pest all the way through the game. I think Goryu is always really good as well. We had, as you always do as a fan, we had our grievances with the ref in this game, and interestingly, there was a ref substitution, which you said. Look, I'm fairly new to being a regular follower of football, and I'd never seen that before. And you said, Matt, you'd seen it, but I'd never seen a ref substitution. But I was quite glad to see. Well, I was at first quite glad to see the back of the first ref. No offence, because obviously, hope she's not too.
Well, she stayed on as fourth official, didn't she?
She stayed on as fourth
official. That
bad. But she was our ref in a Villa game that we went to see at the Pirelli Stadium, and we thought that she was particularly.
She was very accepting of Rachel Daly's
hitting the deck every 5 minutes.
Protestations, to put it as diplomatically as we can.
Right. Okay.
And it's safe to say that we weren't the only fans. I know, obviously, they were all Leicester fans, but we were not the only fans making that point fairly vociferously to her.
Yeah, but anyway, that's a very obviously if you're a fan and the game's not going your way, you're always going to find things to complain about refereeing wise, aren't you? So, but yeah, I think all in all, I think if we're being kind, I think we're really struggling at the moment, just injuries wise, and that's about it really. Like that's about all you can say. Like we just don't have the players that we need going forward to score goals. We are defending well. We've only conceded 5 goals, but we just can't create anything because we just don't have the players. I don't really know what to say. And you know, obviously we've spoken about Everton and having a tough run of games and potentially not picking up any points until January now. And I think we're probably in a similar situation because we've got United, City, and Chelsea. And I just want to go and sit in a dark room and rock backwards and forwards when I think about that. But
just hibernate until January.
Yeah, just hang on until January. I have joked about getting Rachel Williams on loan.
I mean, again, snap your hand off for her. I think,
but she would never leave Man United because she gets to come on and be the hero in like basically most games. So, but we need someone like that. We just need like somebody who can just, yeah.
I mean, I will say it's got to the point now regarding the injury crisis that, I mean, there's 2 moments that have stood out for me. Earlier this week, Leicester put out a tweet trying to promote the upcoming Man United match and sell some tickets, and they promoted that by having a pretend WhatsApp conversation with Eileen Whelan, who wasn't a striker but deputised there for us last season before she retired when we were also having a bit of an injury crisis. And I saw the kind of message from Eileen pop notification on my phone, and I was like, that's it, they brought her back. Because I literally said that to Charlie a couple of days before, and no disrespect to Eileen Whelan, but getting excited about recalling I'm not sure how old she is, but mid-30s, retired attacking midfielder. That kind of shows you where we are. And then earlier you ran into the office to shouting because there was an Instagram reel of Lena Peterman on a treadmill, and that honestly, that we are clinging on by our fingernails here to stuff to look forward to. I think I know this is obviously we're reviewing the game week and we've not said anything about West Ham. This is going to sound extremely bitter. I wasn't hugely impressed with them. I think they showed a lot of industry, and I think, you know, as Charlie's already said, I think Ueki and Asai are both very, very dependable players. We played West Ham in pre-season. We beat them 5-2, and Asai coming on when we were 5-0 up was the only real bright spot for West Ham in that match. She scored twice, and generally, I think she's really, really impressive. Same with Ueki. They're both just powerful, tenacious, and I think to West Ham's credit, they played to their strengths there. You know, we've talked quite a bit about, you know, say like Spurs, who have 2 good forwards, neither of whom they seem to want to play as forwards and that kind of thing. No disrespect to Jess Naz there, but like it doesn't. It sounds very basic to say they're playing to their best players' strengths, but they did. And I think yesterday as well, they made it a real kind of midfield quagmire battle. That game was kind of won and lost in the midfield. And I think, unfortunately for us, they had Gori and Pavi. I think Pavi she's one of those players where when she's playing against you, you can get wound up by her very, very easily. When she's playing, when you don't have any skin in the game, she's great value because I think she's a really, really exciting player and is also one of those kind of players who's very good at winding up the opposition.
She's a bit of a shithouse.
Yeah. And then Gori, I mean, again, this sounds like I'm clutching at straws, but Gori versus Mace was the kind of the midfield battle, and Mace got booked quite early on for a tackle that, in my opinion, was not a foul. Meanwhile, I think Gori committed 5 fouls yesterday and didn't get booked, and had a couple of other fairly borderline decisions go for her. And, you know, again, we've said many times we're clutching at straws. Please, listeners, you've got to give us this. But I think the difference between Mace being booked quite early on and then walking that tightrope and Gori kind of not ever having a reprimand, which meant she just kind of kept doing what she was doing, which was, you know, some fairly kind of streetwise challenges, shall we say, to break up the play and just kind of try and control the game really from that midfield area. I think that was a bit of a difference. With the best in the world, I don't think it's going to change anything. I don't think it's going to win us the game, but right now it just feels like the universe is conspiring against us a little bit.
I told you we had some grievances with the referee. I wasn't going to get into
just a little bit.
Like I said, I don't think there was anything hugely egregious in there, but yeah, it felt like one of that plus the injuries plus the fact that it's kind of mounting up, and obviously the midfield battle as well. I think that was again a savvy move from Rhian Skinner there, because last week we lost Sam Tierney to injury, who'd played up until that point every single minute of this season and played every minute of last season, and that game yesterday was absolutely tailor-made for her. So I think, credit West Ham, credit Rhian Skinner for recognising we were depleted in that area and basically saying let's punish them by it, almost like a kind of a squash game in terms of them just trying to absolutely dominate the centre of the field and kind of making sure that all the play got funneled through there into a real kind of a tight zone, which they then backed themselves to dominate, and they did. So fair play.
I think something that I thought about the other day, I was listening to, again, Tim Stillman's podcast, Ask Us, and they were talking about Katrine Kuhl and the fact that apparently it was her, well, the vibes he's got anyway is that it was her decision to stay at Arsenal because she wanted to fight for a place. It's obviously not really going to plan. And she could be the sort of player that would go out on loan. And I think Leicester would be a really good place for her to go to. She obviously had a good time at Everton last season. And, so she's not afraid of moving away from London. And I think going to Leicester and sort of being one of the main attacking players there might be good for her. There's also Lily Murphy at Man City. She's sort of had 2 or 3 appearances, I think, off the bench for Man City. They've obviously sent out Bobby Pritchard on loan as well. So they're not afraid to send players out on loan. I think it's going to need to be a good window in January to help Leicester out, because like you say, you've got some really long-term injuries and something, is there something in the water at Leicester? Is there going to be more to come? Because as good as she is, you probably don't want to be playing Ruby Mace up front too much.
No.
The game overall was pretty close. When we look at most of the stats anyway, possession was about the same. West Ham completed slightly more passes, but Sophie Howard was the player with the most passes completed. It was 9 shots to 7. But West Ham's 1.4 XG to Leicester's 0.3 was a big difference. Something else I wanted to pick up with you two actually was Janina Leipzig, because I thought Lisa Kopp had quite a good start to the season. I've not seen anything about her being injured. And I was a bit surprised when Leipzig sort of started taking over completely, but she's also playing really well. And it's one of those that's a great headache to have, having 2 keepers that are performing brilliantly. Do you think this is going to be one of those situations where, well, at the moment, looking like Lisa Kopp might be looking to leave because she's not getting enough pitch time?
Yeah, 100%. I think, obviously, I don't want to keep referring back to our podcast too much, but obviously you were on this episode, Sam, so I think
I'll allow it.
We spoke about how we felt potentially there was going to be a bit more of a competition this season, and we thought maybe Kopp might actually take that number 1 shirt. Had been playing for the Netherlands a lot, sort of finished the season after Yanni was struggling with injury, and she started the first 2 games, but I think the turning point was I think actually a League Cup game against Bristol, which I went to at the Pirelli, which we actually lost because only Julie Thibault scored a penalty, which was really great to see.
Sort of a portent of things to come now.
Even when we had Mouchon and Rantala taking penalties, they both missed, which was But anyway, so Yanni played that game. I believe Kopp started that game and then Yanni came on for the penalties, because I think Yanni's a bit more of a penalty specialist, and she saved like 4 penalties. And I think after that, she was back in. And then I think she's just been an absolute brick wall.
Yeah, she's been fantastic.
And I think, I agree. Like, I think we said at the time when we thought the situation might be reversed, that Kopp might come in, that it wasn't a sustainable situation as they're both very good goalkeepers and one of them is going to want to leave and be number 1 somewhere. And I think, I agree. I think, now that Yanni has barely put a foot wrong and has got that spot pretty nailed on. I think if I was Klopp, I would certainly be pushing for a move pretty soon. And I think Klopp wasn't on the bench yesterday, which amongst all of the other injury concerns, I was just like, oh, okay, well,
Why not?
well, cool,
Why
fine.
not?
So I don't know what has gone on there, whether she's just got a bit of a niggle or something, or taking a knock in training. But yeah, I completely agree. I think, I think we said jokingly on our podcast, Spurs.
Yeah. I mean, Spurs have been linked with a different keeper today. I think
BJ
that's
Hackens, goalkeeper. Yeah.
Yeah, and that with the best will in the world has been a consistent issue for them. I think going back to that Bunny Shaw header you spoke about earlier, Sam, where there's a cross from Hemp and it just kind of hangs in the air, and Bunny just kind of stands there and it almost drops onto her head and goes in. It's like, yeah, it's one of those situations where I think a more commanding goalkeeper solves that. I think her Becky Spencer we're talking about here. I think her post shot XG numbers are not good. So I think it's definitely an area Spurs are looking to address, and I would be stunned if they don't look at Kopp, but particularly given the performance she put in the FA Cup semi-final last year against them.
Mm-hmm.
And we said the other day that, Kopp has played more recently for the Netherlands than she has for us, which, again, with the best will in the world, is not a really sustainable situation from her perspective, because quite rightly she'll be looking at that and thinking, I deserve a starting berth in whatever team I'm playing in. And, I think we would certainly not begrudge her looking for that move in January. I think it's one of those, it's a great situation to have while it lasts, but realistically it feels like while there's certainly teams out there kind of looking at their goalkeepers and sort of with question marks on them, it feels mad that we've got two who I'd be very confident could fit into pretty much any WSL squad out there, and in Kopp's case could start for most WSL teams.
Yeah, it's one that I think if you were a team that was in the Champions League and fighting to probably win the FA Cup and the League Cup as well, you're trying to fight on all fronts, like an Arsenal, like a City, like a Chelsea, then you want two really good keepers. But for a team of, Leicester that are looking like this season trying to stay in the league, you'd maybe sacrifice one of your good keepers for another good striker. Maybe there's a swap deal in there somewhere. Who knows?
I mean, I question whether Lisa can just play up front.
Yeah, that's an option. Maybe that's why she's sticking around. Maybe she knows that's the plan.
I mean, she's quite tall, so she might be able to get on the end of a good cross, that kind of thing. On Becky Spencer, you're right with the post-shot XG. I was actually about to quote it before you mentioned it. So the second worst keeper in the league has a -2 post-shot XG difference, so conceded 2 more than their post-shot XG would suggest. Rebecca Spencer is the worst in the league with -5.4, so she's quite a way worse than anyone else. Which I mentioned on the pod last week that I was kind of surprised that they gave her a new contract in one way because she's not been very good, but also that I think this is whatever the opposite of a purple patch is for her, and she will go back to being a sort of decent keeper. But also I think it also speaks to the fact that they're struggling for depth because they've obviously got another keeper they brought in on an emergency loan from West Ham that they're not that happy with. I don't know. I've not really seen. I think it's Talbot. I've not seen her play before, so I don't know how good she is. But they're obviously not willing to put her on the pitch. And Becky Spencer is their number one. But yeah, she's not putting in the performances at the moment. But anyway, that is West Ham 1, Leicester 0. I think a match that will. I think when we look back at the end of the season, could be the difference for especially West Ham staying up. I think if they'd have, I think they will be probably within 3 points of whoever gets relegated if it's not them. So, yeah, it could be a big one to look back on at the end of the season. But we'll move on to our final game. So, the final game of the weekend was last night as we record, Sunday night, 6:45 at Leigh Sports Village, also on Sky Sports. It was Man United 0, Villa 0. For a 0-0, I thought this was actually quite a good game. I managed to catch the vast majority of it. Fallon Tullis-Joyce definitely took a chance early doors, trying to dribble past Gabby Nunes within her own 6-yard box and just about got away with it. She was the centre of attention again, as she made a great save from Jordan Nobbs' shot after punching the ball in the first place. Gabby George was another player I want to highlight. She had a couple of great sort of potentially goal-saving blocks, first on Chastity Grant in the first half, and then on Katie Robinson in the second half. Other than that, there wasn't really that much to talk about, which I know I've just said it was a really good game, but there was a lot of sort of threat without that much actual amazing chances. I'm going to go through some of the stats first before I throw it over to you two, because I've got a question that I think it would be interesting to see what your answer is. So, Man United are still unbeaten in the WSL this season, and Villa are still winless. Villa have still never beaten Man United in any competition within 90 minutes, anyway. In this game, however, Villa had, well, just shy of 60% possession. 5 of the 6 players with the most touches were Aston Villa players. They had 1.9 XG to just 0.5 from Man United, partly helped by the fact they had 10 shots to United's 5. And the other thing that I wanted to pull out from the game in the stats was the dribbles, which isn't something we normally talk about that much, but dribbles attempted 18 to 20, so 18 for Man United, 20 for Villa, about normal. You know, they've got about roughly the same. Man United completed 10 of those. Villa completed just 3 of the 20 that they attempted. So Man United not necessarily having that much of the ball, but when they do have it, we're dribbling quite a lot. Villa seem to be having a lot more of the ball and getting a lot more chances, but were just seemingly dreadful when trying to take players on 1v1. And then, yeah, like I say, Man United still unbeaten and Villa still winless. So the question that I wanted to ask you two was actually one we had in from Anna on Instagram, which was who will be the happier of these two sides at the end of the game? Because obviously Man United are unbeaten but are falling further behind the top 2. Villa are finally getting another point on the board because they're still struggling at the bottom, but Villa are much the better team. So who do you think are going to be the happier of those two sides now?
That is a very good question. And I think it's almost like neither. Because I think Robert DePau said in his post-match interview he's kind of sick of putting in these really good performances and not getting anything from it. I mean, obviously they got a point, but I would say probably DePau should be the happier. I understand that he's frustrated, but if you take this game in isolation, I think they did really well. I honestly I know that Man United defended quite well, but I thought they were quite poor. And I think Mark Skinner's sort of post-match comments were, I don't know. I said to Matt in his pre-match interview, I was like, I don't know. He seems to be more coherent to me this season. I understand what he's trying to say. But in his reading his post-match comments, I was like, what is he talking about? He only spoke about the defence in the first half and how they let Villa in, but he failed to mention that when they did actually get the ball, they did basically nothing with it. They took until the 72nd minute to register a shot on target. I think, yeah, considering some of the players that Man United have brought in from an attacking perspective, which he sort of alluded to as well. He kept saying about, he's trying to challenge for Europe and he's had to buy all these players to really try and push on quickly. And I was just like, what are you on about? And yeah, it's just bizarre, really. But yeah, I think, sorry, that was a very rambly answer, but I think Robert DePau should be the happier, if not, within the context of the season, how it's going, that it's frustrating to put in another good performance and not really get anything from it. But like I say, I just felt like United were pretty poor and I didn't really believe they were going to score until Rachel Williams came on, and I thought, well, that's it now. They're just going to, nick this 1-0 with a Rachel Williams classic header from a set piece. But not even that didn't happen. So, Matt, do you want to give your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'd say DePau as well. I think, I think it's one of those, you can look at it and be frustrated that you've not really got what you deserve from the game, which I think Villa deserve to win that. But equally, I think, he's probably woken up this morning with, the dust having settled a bit and thought, you know what, not that many teams, certainly not the ones from the kind of mid-table downwards, are going to be able to go to Leeds Sports Village and get a point, get a result. And although it's frustrating that, for Villa, the results aren't quite mirroring the performances right now, again, it's one of those things. I think you said it earlier, Sam, that eventually it's going to click in for Villa. If they can keep playing like this, they will start picking up results. And yeah, I mean, they've got Palace next at home, and then I think they've got Arsenal away, and then the last game before the winter break is West Ham at home. So I feel like for them, there's a huge opportunity there. There's, you know, certainly the two home games, they've got to both look at both of those and think we're going to win them. I am going to be very interested in particularly that Palace game, because obviously we said the same thing as Leicester fans. We were much stronger than in terms of our injury issues, and Palace did a real number on us. Just kind of basically the fact that we were trying to attack them seemed to completely play into their hands. They seemed really well set up for that. So I will be interested to see that. I don't necessarily think it's going to be as comprehensive as some observers might think that's going to be. It's going to be the game where the dam finally bursts at Villa and they win 3-0 or something like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot for Villa to take out of this game. Certainly, probably more than United, who, as I completely agree with what Charlie said. It just, once again, kind of the story of Mark Skinner's last couple of years, really. It just felt very kind of incoherent. It was hard to tell what they were trying to do in terms of. I think, to be fair, you have to give Villa credit, because I think they did disrupt United a lot, and we might have seen more kind of patterns and style from United had they not been kind of quite so rattled by Villa's approach. But equally, you look at the players Man United have got to deploy on that pitch, you feel like whatever happens, they should be able to impose themselves on that game. And in the end, like Charlie says, they kind of resort to the old reliable, which is bringing on Rachel Williams and just lobbing balls into the box and seeing what happens. And yeah, I don't know. It's so, obviously they had a really bright start to the season, United, and they had that first half against Brighton where I was really, really impressed with them, because they were just set up in this kind of 4-2-4 out of possession. They had this really, really aggressive press being led by Turland. It looked really coherent. I know I keep using that word, but it looked like they had a real plan, and they really, really disrupted Brighton. And then halftime comes, Vidosic makes a few tweaks, and United just don't respond. And then, I think that Arsenal match last weekend, they were very, very lucky to get away with anything there, because again, looked basically completely overmatched for 90% of the game. Again, Rachel Williams, Claxon was sounded. Again, she was the one who made the difference. And yeah, I think again they were pretty lucky to get away with this. I know, speaking of goalkeeper post shot XG, I know Fallon Joyce is doing very, very well this season. I do wonder. I know last night I think it was technically a save, the one where she kind of got caught on the goal line, and then I think she got a boot to it just before Nunes struck.
Yeah, she did.
So I guess that goes down as probably a very high XG chance of Villa and a very good post shot XG save from Tullis Joyce. But I do wonder how much her performances right now are potentially papering over some pretty big cracks. And yeah, if she has a bit of a drop in form, or even kind of just reverts to the sort of the mean of where we'd expect her to be based on XG in general as the model, you can see some of these draws becoming 1-0, 2-0 defeats, some of these wins becoming draws, and then we're back where we were last season with Man United, and the same discourse around Mark Skinner, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've just had a look at that shot, because I hadn't thought about that, about the high XG, etc. of it. So that Gabby Nunes shot in the third minute from 2 yards out was a 0.61 XG chance, or post shot XG was 0.96. So
yeah,
basically a goal.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those, not to disparage stats at all, but that's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? Because it came directly from Tullis Joyce's own mistake, and yet when you look at the stats, you're going to say, "Oh, she saved pretty much a certain goal," and it's like, yeah, she did, but it was kind of almost entirely
because it was her fault in the first place. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's one of those that I often say that you've got to. Although I'm a big stats guy, obviously you can't just use stats to look at football and to sort of analyse it properly. I think I always think you've got to have about 60% of it you can use stats, and about 60% of it you can do with the eye test. There's a bit of an overlap where you get a bit where whether you're using stats or the eye test, it covers both. You can get the same out of it. But I think there's areas where you can only use the eye test, and areas where you can only use stats that you wouldn't necessarily work out by watching the game. And I still think there's a little bit as well that whether you're looking at the stats or whether you're looking at the eye test and just watching the game, you still won't pick up on stuff. Most people won't anyway.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking about you mentioned about the sort of dribbling stats, and I think actually, yeah, if you take that and you think, oh well, like, you know, Man United, when they got the ball, they were carrying it forward, they were doing more successful dribbles, but actually watching the game, I thought therein lay their problem. Like, I think my sort of, I mean, Jay-Z is Jay-Z when she came on, like, you know, she's going to dribble the ball unnecessarily when there's like about 3 different options on. But I think Bizet sort of reverted to that a little bit as well. I think that was my sort of criticism of her last season for Spurs, is like sometimes I was just like, what are you doing? It's like, just put the ball in the box.
The end products kind of thing.
And I feel like she did that last night, and I think she actually, like, when she was at fullback, she was sort of forced to be a bit more direct. Because obviously if you're supposed to be playing fullback and you're sort of doing these like mazy dribbles, and if you lose the ball, then
you're in trouble.
You've got to get back. But so yeah, I think like when she was fullback, she was more direct and she was putting these amazing crosses into Turland. But last night she was picking up the ball, and then I was like, okay, there's like options here. Toon wants it, or like somebody, and I was like, okay, we're just going to dribble it into the corner, are we? Okay, cool. So yeah, I just thought like that was an interesting sort of thing where you said about the dribbles, but I just thought that dribbling wasn't their problem. They were sort of dribbling when they didn't need to.
Yeah.
It was just
dribbles without purpose kind of thing.
Yeah.
Stat padding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you've said there, really. That I think towards the end, especially when Jace came on as well, I was just having a look at the stats for her. She had 6 dribbles attempted, which was the most of any player in the game, despite the fact that she came on, when did she come on? 70th minute. So with only 20 minutes to go, she had 6 dribbles and only completed 2 of them. So it's that exact kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there was, again, you've got the stats there, but also kind of backed up by the eye test. There was a lot of times when it felt like United were just, both teams towards the end were both just like lobbing the ball into the box and just trying to make something happen, which you expect. But there was a lot of times where Jay-Z just seemed to be kind of, she'd get the ball and just head down, she was trying to make it to the byline and I guess try and cut it back from there. But it just felt like, as you said there, she lost the more dribbles failed than succeeded, and a lot of it, even the ones that succeeded from memory, it all felt a little bit kind of unnecessary, really, not the most direct route to goal and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. I think going back to sort of the start of this little section of who will be the happy with the two sides, I think that kind of goes some way to show why Robert DePaul, I keep going to call him DePaul still, Robert DePaul, will be the happier of the two managers, because they were much more sensible with their play. I think Villa created good chances and the possession they had, and like you say, Man United were just not really getting enough out of the game. But yeah, that is our sort of roundup of a little bit of analysis of the matches that went on this weekend. And now it's time for this. Yes, here we are, listener. For the first time in a couple of months, because I've got some guests on the pod, we're going to go back to fan favourite by the sound of it, and it is Know Your Stat. It is essentially a simple game of categories. I'm going to give Charli and Matt a category, and they're going to take it in turns, trying to guess through the list. We've got 3 categories today. For each of them, you're going to get 1 life each, so you get to get 1 wrong and still carry on. We're gonna go with, I'm gonna let Charli decide which round we do first, and Matt is gonna start it. So, Charlie, would you like the round about goals? Would you like the round about touches? Or would you like the round about appearances?
Appearances.
Appearances. Okay, so Matt, you're going first. I would like you to tell me the names of the 40 oldest players to feature in the WSL this season. So these players need to have played at least 1 minute. So they just need to have been at least subbed on, if not started a game at any point. And it is the 40 oldest players. I will tell you the sort of cut-off point is February 1994. So anyone that was born before February 1994. There are 40 players to pick from. Off you go.
I mean, just to start, that's a depressing cutoff because that is like 3 years younger than either of us. I will go with we've just been talking about her, Rachel Williams.
Rachel Williams is, the second oldest player in the WSL this season. 36 years old. Not far off being 37.
Janice Cayman.
Yeah, correct answer. She is 36 as well.
Laura Coombs.
Laura Coombs, yeah, she's 33.
Lucy Bronze.
Yep, Lucy Bronze is on that list. She's also 33.
Kim Little.
Kim Little's 34. Correct answer.
Rachel Daly.
Rachel Daly's 32. Correct answer.
Nikita Paris.
Nikita Paris is the 42nd oldest player in the WSL this season. She is 30, but she's not quite old enough. She was born in March 1994.
Oh, man.
Horrible one to miss out, but that is your life gone, Matt. So we're going back to Charlie.
Oh, God, my mind's gone blank. Lucy Staniforth.
Yep, correct answer. She's 32.
Courtney Brosnan.
Courtney Brosnan is not old enough.
Oh.
She is only 29. It was actually her 29th birthday yesterday.
Oh, my
So that
God.
is 2 incorrect answers already. And Charlie wins. Well done. I'll read you out the list of names that you could have had. Obviously, you've only got 7 of them, so it's a relatively long list.
Sorry.
You could have had Adriana Leon, Amy Turner, Ash Neville, Danny Bringer's-Dottir, Dan Turner, Drew Spence, Fran Kirby, Gemma Bonner, Jasmine Matthews, Jordan Nobbs, Josie Green, Justin Van Havermate, Katie Stengel, Katrina Gorry, Catherine Veye, Kenza Darley, Kirsty Smith, Christy Mewis, Leila Uhabi, Leah Volti, Maria Thoris-Dottir, Millie Bright, Nee Faye, Rachel Laws, Becky Spencer, Sabrina D'Angelo.
Who was the oldest?
The oldest was... Sorry, I've also missed out some of the other names. You didn't say Shalene Zadorsky, Steph Catley, Vicky Lasada, Viva Say, Yana Daniels, or Sophie Howard, which I was amazed at.
Ah.
I was on an hour about Sophie. I
thought she was. I know she's younger than us, so I was kind of I don't know where I got Courtney Brosnan from.
Sophie Howard turned 31 in September, so she is old enough. And Nee Faye is the oldest, at 37.
Yeah. What's really embarrassing to compound my misery there is how many of those players we have talked about on this podcast. Specifically, I have as well. So, not a great showing. Josie Green foiling me again. Nikita Paris foiling us again.
But that is a win for Charlie in round 1. So, Matt, you get to pick what round 2 is. Would you like the one about goals or the one about touches?
Let's go touches, please.
Okay, so you two often talk about, as you did this week, or last week, I should say, in your podcast, about teams in the bottom half of the table. So I've taken that as a bit of inspiration, and I would like you to tell me any player that has had 300 or more touches in the WSL this season and plays for a team in the bottom half. There are 23 players to pick from, and we're going to start with Charlie.
Sophie Howard.
Correct answer, 402.
Katrina Gorry.
Yep, Katrina Gorry is on there, 394.
Oh, God. Justine Van Havermaet.
Yep, she is up there. She is on 478.
Claire Wheeler.
Claire Wheeler, I knew you'd go for her. She is 9th on the list, 422.
What a legend.
Never lets you down.
Lucy Parker.
Lucy Parker's correct, 4th on the list with 476.
I'm going back to the well. Courtney Brosnan.
Courtney Brosnan is an incorrect answer. She's had 291,
Oh.
which is so close, but not quite right.
Oh.
So, back to Charlie. How is your life gone, Matt?
Oh, no. Why have you gone down that mental road, Charlie? Becky Spencer?
Becky Spencer is not on the list. She is on 255. So you've both lost your life.
I've panicked.
Matt does need to get this one right, though.
Jordan Nobbs.
Jordan Nobbs is the correct
Sorry,
answer.
I jumped the gun there.
No, you're good. 444 for Jordan Nobbs. So you both got 3 correct. It's sudden death now.
Megan Finnegan.
Yeah, correct answer. Second most on this list, 502.
Ashley Neville.
Ash Neville, yeah, 461. Correct answer.
Oh, God. Ruby Mace.
Ruby Mace is on 316. Just about, but is a correct answer. She's number 22 of 23 players on this list.
I'm now desperately trying to remember which Leicester players have played which matches. Sari Keys.
Sari Keys, I think, just hasn't played enough matches. She's on 235.
Yeah.
So that is 2-0 to
enough.
Charlie.
Come on, get in.
When you started saying then about which Leicester players you could go for, I didn't want to say it out loud, obviously, ruin the game, but there aren't actually any Leicester players left on this list. You said all the correct answers.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better because I was thinking about Leipzig. I was thinking that the thing is, I think both CJ Bott and Courtney Nevin would have got the numbers had they not missed some game time. So I thought Keys was probably the safest bet. But yeah,
CJ Bott was the closest. She had 297, so she was only 3 touches short. But the ones that you could have had were Amy Everett, Amber Tiziak, Anna Patton. She was the number 1 answer. Anik Denton, Claire Hunt, Evelina Simonen, Honoka Hayashi, Josie Green again, Katrina Veje, Molly Bartrip, Noel Moritz, Sarah Holmgard, Shay Yanez, and Shalina Zadorsky. So it is 2-0 to Charlie. Even though it's 2-0 to Charlie, we will do the last round. Now, I've done this a few times before, obviously. No one to date has won 3-0. This could be the time, Charlie, if you can win this one. It is Matt's turn to go first. And it is any player that has scored multiple times this season. So I want you to tell me the 28 players that have scored 2 or more goals in the WSL this season. Matt, to go first.
Nikita Paris.
Correct, 3 goals.
Johanna Reuting-Kannerid.
Also on 3 goals.
Kiko Seike.
Kiko Seike, yeah, that opening day hat trick.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull the trigger. Bunny Shaw.
Yeah, I don't know why no one had pulled it yet. Yeah, top of the league for it.
I thought you were playing some sort of game of chess of like who's going to go to Bunny Shaw first, but you just literally forgot about Bunny Shaw.
It's not like she's top scorer of the league or anything.
Miedemar?
Viv Miedemar is an incorrect answer.
Yeah, sorry.
She has only scored 1. So that is your life gone, Matt.
Oh my God.
Already. Charlie, on to you.
Elizabeth Turland.
Elizabeth Turland's correct. She's got 2 goals, just about.
Beth England.
Beth England does also have 2 goals. There are some players on this list still with more than 2 as well.
I bet they are.
Frida Marnham.
Frida Marnham has 3. Arsenal's top scorer.
Myra Ramirez.
Yeah, Myra Ramirez got 2 goals.
Guru Wrighton.
Guru Wrighton has 4. She is the second top scorer in the league.
I have a horrible feeling, this is going to be Champions League messing with my mind. But Caitlin Ford.
Caitlin Ford has 2 goals. You're good.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm panicking. Oh, Lauren Hemp.
Lauren Hemp has 2 goals. Correct answer. There are still 4 players with 3 goals. Jill Rord is one of them.
Oh.
Correct answer.
Rachel Daly.
Yep, Rachel Daly is another one then. 3 goals for her.
Gabby Nunez.
Gabby Nunez has 2.
Russo.
Russo has 2. After that penalty at the weekend.
Drew Spence.
Drew Spence is an incorrect answer. That means that it is a 3-0 win for Charlie.
I'm so happy. At least I've like won something. Like
even if Leicester didn't. Not that Matt's had a really bad week of supporting football anyway, but now has just been the first person to ever lose No Stat 3-0.
I didn't deserve anything from that game. Injuries played a part, but it
XG all over the place.
Back to the drawing board. Yeah. It's just lack of coherence.
The players that you could have had. So the players that have had 2 goals this season are Annabelle Blanchard. She obviously got 2 in 1 game. Beth Mead, Cornelia Capox, Evelina Simonen, Frank Kirby. Both had both penalties for her. Jess Park, who scored a couple of screamers. Marie Herbinger, Livia Smith, Rico Recchi, Sandy Baltimore, and Taylor Hines obviously scored 2 in a match last weekend. And then there were a couple of players that scored 3 goals, which were Aggie Beaver-Jones and, of course, Grace Clinton. So they were the players that you could have had. Drew Spence wasn't a bad shout. I was looking at some of the numbers earlier, and I can't remember exactly how many it is, but she is up there for the most shots in the league. So not a bad shout.
My logic behind picking Spence there was, I think you mentioned it earlier, Spurs are the third highest scorers in the league. But I was trying to go through it in my mind, and I was thinking, well, I think Naz has only scored one in the league. I said England, and then I was like, well, who else is there? Like, because I think Thomas might have only scored one or something like that.
Martha Thomas is still yet.
I was kind of just groping. There you go. So I was kind of like, well, someone must have scored these mythical goals. That was a bit of a shot in the dark. Sumanen was the other one. Obviously, like you say, that was kind of the other option there, but I picked the wrong one.
Yeah, and then like you say, only England and Sumanen have actually scored more than one goal for Spurs this season, despite the fact they've scored so many. But congratulations, Charlie, on your 3-0 win. Very well done.
Absolutely thrilled with that.
Yeah. To rub salt in the wounds, obviously, we did record a lost podcast that will never see the light of day with you, Sam, and we did this quiz, and I won. And now,
I don't think we have any record of that.
Well, there's no.
It's sort of your word against everyone else's. So
fake news. The election was stolen, etc., etc. Stop the count. Should have said it then.
I think you probably did. Yeah, we recorded an episode before the season started, but unfortunately, of the hour and a bit episode that we recorded, only the first 15 minutes seemed to be saved, and then the rest of it was gone forever. So it was put down as a friendly. But yeah, thank you both for coming on the pod. It's nice to actually finally have you on the pod, and we've got it recorded. It's great. I hope you've both enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us.
I know I've mentioned your pod before, but for those listeners who maybe don't know who you are, do you want to just plug your pod quick?
Yeah, thank you. We will. So our podcast is called Why Always She. The name is one of my greatest achievements in a career of marketing. But yeah, no, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. We're a bit less organised and sort of, stat heavy as Sam is. We don't necessarily tend to recap the games from that perspective. We just sort of talk about whatever we want to talk about, usually moaning about Leicester. But no, if you're just interested in a more, I guess, relaxed, chatty vibe, come and give us a listen. We talk about the WSL, we talk about Champions League sometimes, and normally rant about the Lionesses when they've cocked up another friendly. But yeah, wherever you get your podcasts, Why Was She? It would be much appreciated if you would give us a listen and a follow.
Yeah, I think we use the same platform as well. So wherever you can find this podcast, you can find Why Always She as well. I would recommend it. It's a podcast I listen to on your sort of, I guess, pretty much every week, isn't it? A new episode is out. Definitely would recommend. But yeah, thank you both for coming on, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. If you enjoyed today's episode, do make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you can, do leave a 5-star review, because it does go a long way in helping others find the show. For even more stats and insights and stuff like that, obviously you can follow me at Stattorino on X, Instagram and Threads. And we're now on Instagram for the pod as well, at Decoding the WSL. And as ever, if you want to get in touch, just drop me a message on social media or send over an email, because always love to hear the thoughts, any questions you have, and any pod ideas as well, which people have been sending in, which is great. They'll be coming up in international breaks and winter breaks and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Matt. And thank you again, listener, for listening. And I will speak to you at the next one.